And how do you find psychedelics to be beneficial for people? Why are you so excited about the psychedelics?
Well, there was always 100 different angles to look at psychedelics, and that's maybe why it's so fascinating as well. But one of the things that I like to claim that it almost does every time is that it creates some contrast for people. So if people have, if they are stuck in their world, or they see things the same way every day, and if that's a mental health problem, then that's something that they want to change. And then a psychedelic experience, either if it's a challenging one or if it's a blissful, calm one, it still provides them with this kind of contrast where they can get the contrast between this experience and their everyday life. And this creates more, I think, more flexibility in their thinking in their everyday life. So that's one way that I like to look at it.
Yeah. Do you think it can be beneficial to just take psychedelics without doing other types of brain training, like without doing coaching or going to a psychologist or doing breath work and meditation? Do you think like only using psychedelics in and of itself can help you as a person if you struggle with trauma, for example?
I think definitely it can. So it's it's a tool, and it can be used. It can be beneficial, almost in itself. And I think it kind of varies a little bit from medicine to medicine, and what kind of intention you have when you use it. And I think the classic psychedelics, if you just use it, let's say recreationally, and you have an intention to have fun with it, then it can provide some therapy as well. But maybe that's not the biggest thing that you will get out of it, as your intention is actually to have fun and try to avoid anything maybe uncomfortable, or so you don't have this therapeutic setting. But I do think the first time I tried MDMA, for example, was a very therapeutic experience that made me really rethink how I interacted with people. And when I passed beggars on the street, I had a different interaction with them, and that was just because I had this one experience in a recreational setting. So yeah.
So my experience was similar. It's very it's kind of affecting the way that you see the world. So for me, it was like I experienced it as if this was ayahuasca. I was experiencing it as if everybody loved me, and I love everybody. And if people rejected me, they just didn't get it yet, So it made me super happy, and I think that's the right way to think in everyday life too. Like this kind of experience and this feeling, this knowledge that I got through taking this substance, it kind of lasted for like 2 weeks, but then I still find it to be true, I still think it's very useful to be thinking that way, if you know what I mean. But of course, it's less strong. Like now, I don't experience it that way, but I think that maybe like training your brain into thinking that way in your everyday life, is very useful. And I do also think that I have been interviewing people that was at the verge of suicide, that actually got their life, they were saved from doing that after ayahuasca, because they kind of handled their trauma in the ceremony with the assistance of this shaman. So I'm not going to go into that story, but it kind of gives you the impression that just the experience is is healing in and of itself. But then again, I do think that it's a lot more effective if you can work between ceremonies and train your brain. I don't know if you, Dawa or Leif Arne, if you have any examples, or if you want to say something on the matter that could enlighten the discussion regarding that.
Well, yeah, to go a bit, I think for me, both mushrooms, but also MDMA really changed. I don't know what happened, but I feel like the MDMA really triggered something and healed something in my heart space, because after that, I've actually been much more comfortable to be around other people. Like there was like a significant change in my whole social dynamic. So I thought that was very interesting. And yeah, to go into what you asked earlier, like, do you just need to do psychedelics, or do you also need to do like other personal development? And for me, it's very hard to do because I've never done psychedelics just recreationally. So I've always combined it with, you know, inner child work, or researching my thoughts and feelings and trying to kind of use those. And I feel in the combination can be extremely useful, because I felt like I'd done quite a bit of work with Byron Katie and inner child work, and that definitely had cleared away a lot of the muck. But then just having this whole chemical flow through your system with MDMA, I really felt that definitely helped. But it's difficult to make a comparison, since I'm only I only have my personal experiences. But I am curious to hear, for example, what Oscar, his experiences are with the work that he does, if he sees that with the people he works with, for example, if there's like certain trends.
You want to answer, Oscar?
Yeah, I think it's there are definitely trends, and when people come to me, it's some people have used, for example, MDMA. I think it's a very it can be very different when you use it in a recreational setting compared to a therapeutic setting. Of course, the other psychedelics as well, but MDMA is more, has this label of being a party drug to a bigger extent. Mushrooms is just, everyone knows mushrooms is weird, you know, or LSD. So it has more this just people are very used to talking about it as a party drug or something to make you feel good. And when my clients come in, some of them have a lot of recreational experience with MDMA, but once they do it in a therapeutic setting, it really changes, and it becomes sometimes it's pleasurable, but usually it's people are crying a lot. It's a lot of uncomfortable emotions that are, you know, popping up through this experience. So so I think it's there's a useful distinction there as well. And I always think of this Richard Alpert, who later became Ram Dass. He wrote in his biography, or his very thin one, that he tried, you know, insane amount of LSD, where I think he did 400 micrograms every 4 hours for a week or something, because he thought the answer was in psychedelics itself. And he said he had the craziest week he could ever imagine, and then 2 days later he was right back where he started. So I always think of that as well. Yeah. So
the intention you go in with when you do psychedelics has a great impact on what you're getting out in terms of self-developing and handling your own mental health. I mean, I had the great idea of pouring LSD into the drinking water because it had such a great effect for me. So I was like, oh, let's share this with everyone. And then I had a discussion on this Facebook group on psychedelics. And we started this long thread where people suggested that might not be a good idea, because people that hadn't done so much self-development, they might just start, you know, being afraid and getting a knife and start running after you with it. So so I realized that there might be a connection between having trained your brain already through self-development work and what you're getting out of psychedelics, and how you use it and what your intention with it has something to say. And I don't know, maybe I can ask you, Björn, because you are a researcher on the brain. You're an evolutionary biologist. Could you enlighten us a little bit on what the benefits and risks of psychedelics are and how it affects our brains? What is it that actually happens?
Yeah, I work as a scientist on mental health at the Norwegian Institute of Public Health, and my interest is partly that this is it's a fairly potent means of helping people with more serious problems, and it's also that psychedelics is a way to help us understand how the brain functions, and then by that, it's not so much to use itself, although I tried whatever I can get hold of. It's the kind of correlates between the experience people have and what we know about the actual effects on the nervous system. And as to the first part of that, it certainly is well documented that these substances can help. This primarily work with psilocybin and ketamine, and to some extent LSD, can help people with like serious depressions. And it can even help people with addiction problems. So that's one aspect of it. And that's kind of unique because none other therapeutic psychoactive substances can be given in a single dose and still have a long-lasting effect, or in a few doses. Any other medicine you know about generally needs to be taken continuously, and then you can couple that with therapy or other sorts of therapy and have helped the person. But with ketamine and psilocybin, you can give one or a few doses without necessarily having additional therapy, and it will still help people or help many people. But then there's the more recreational use, and there's also some evidence from science that the more long-term effect is, as people here mentioned, to make people more sociable, to make people more extrovert and empathetic to other people, which certainly is a good thing, not just for the individual, but for society. So I think this is the classic psychedelics. Primarily, I'm talking about the MDMA is a different type of substance with its own hazards, but the like LSD and psilocybin and DMT act in somewhat the same fashion in the brain. And the beauty or the nice thing is that they do not directly activate the reward modules of the brain, which is why they are not addictive by themselves. They can get you into a good mood, but that is kind of an indirect consequence of the experience you have. It's not like cocaine or heroin will directly affect the reward modules. And they have a more profound effect on those modules, making you immediately very happy, but then they are addictive. And
but Björn, there are still some risks with psychedelics. I mean, there are people in this group right now that has had experiences after using psychedelics that some people would find scary. So
yeah.
I just wondered, what's the risks of psychedelics? Because the people on here, we all love psychedelics. We think it's a great idea. But then if we want to say that, if we want to kind of share this argument that this could be a potent way of helping people with their mental health problems, then we should be aware of what arguments we will meet, because there are some risks also. So I just wondered, could you elaborate on what could the dangers of using psychedelics be? And when...
I'll do that. Yeah. First, though, I should point out that as opposed to most other narcotics, the psychedelics or the classical psychedelics do not interfere with neurological processes that are directly vital for life. You can't overdose on them because they cannot suddenly make your heart stop or make you stop breathing or something, which is also nice. But they do have a very profound effect on how you experience the world. And that effect can turn both ways. It can give you a good trip, or it can give you a bad trip. And while a good trip will have a strong emotional content that will change you, so does a bad trip. So people can, the negative experiences that may pop up can also create problems for people later. And so I think I would certainly not add it to the drinking water or not force it on anybody, but I do think that in a controlled setting, and certainly more so with perhaps with ketamine and psilocybin, which do not last that long and are easier to handle. And certainly ketamine is the nice thing about ketamine. You can just turn it on by giving it intravenously and then turn it off fairly immediately by just removing the fluid. So those substances are easy to handle in a therapeutic setting, and so they are. But yes, you should be the patient or the person going into it should be aware that there are the possibility of a bad trip, and kind of try to find the right setting where you feel safe and where you're less likely to enter that sort of experience.
But I know people that say that, okay, they have long-term negative effects from using psychedelics, that they see things that don't exist and stuff like that. Is that the phenomenon? Like,
you can have flashbacks, yes, from experience you had during the psychedelic use, especially with LSD, and which can be, and they can induce psychosis in certain people, but and I imagine that the negative effects would be primarily in people who are vulnerable to that sort of effects. So you probably wouldn't want to treat, you prefer to treat people with depression rather than anxiety, because the effect of these drugs, the kind of feeling that you lose control of yourself can be anxiety inducing. So you'd be careful about people who are easily turn on their anxiety. But yeah.
So people that have anxiety in their family, they should not use psychedelics, because taking psychedelics could actually trigger anxiousness as a problem for them.
It can alleviate the problem, but that said, I think it's also possible, if they can find the right setting and perhaps start with a small dose, or like a drug like ketamine, which they can just ask to get turned off, or give a signal they want it off again if they get afraid. It's possible to they can also very well have a good experience from taking the drug.
But could you, from taking psychedelics, get an anxiety problem? Or you can kind of, that's one thing. I wonder if like the psychedelics could create the problem, that you get anxiety from psychedelics. And the second thing I want to ask, that I have wondered about, is that there are different people are different. Some people are very sensitive to they can feel, they're sensitive to UFOs, or they can easily go into meditation, whereas other people are more rigid in their brains, so they don't go that easily into the meditative state. And are those people that are more sensitive, are they more at risk? Because some of these people, they kind of can get into the state that psychedelics takes you into without using psychedelics in a way. So it can kind of go on overdrive if you kind of use psychedelics too.
There's certainly a difference between how people react to psychedelics, whether that correlate with how easily they can take advantage of like meditation is not obvious. I think there's other things going on. It's like how you metabolize the drugs, and certainly what state you are in at the moment when you start doing the trip, start taking the drug. If you have negative feelings when you start, then it's likely that these negative feelings will be stronger. So while if you are in a good setting and feel safe, even if you have a tendency for anxiety, you can still have a good experience. And I don't think we know very much about in advance who will react strongly and who will have a less response to the use.
Okay, so we don't know, we don't know. Research we haven't researched it enough. So you can't say that people that are more sensitive, that it's more dangerous for them than people that are less sensitive to, and that it can more easily get into the meditative state. You can't actually say that because there hasn't been enough research to say something about that.
To my knowledge, there may be more research that I don't know about.
Yeah, I don't know. We can talk more about risks later, because now I see that Diane has joined us, and she can present herself, but I can just shortly say that she is doing breath work, and she's activating the natural DMT in our brains. So my questions to you, Diane, would be, do we need psychedelics then? Because can we actually just use other techniques such as breath work and meditation and our natural DMT in our body to treat our trauma and become happier?
Mm-hmm. Well, I can definitely address that. I would like to make comment on the last question, though, if that's all right.
Yes, you can do that.
I am a breath worker. I'm also the founder of the Psychedelic Society of America. And I have my own experiences, with my own path with psychedelics. I'm also an ordained minister of metaphysics. And so putting all of those different modalities together, and I am actually doing a certification in psychedelics, altered states, and transpersonal psychology under Dr. David Luke of Greenwich University in London, through the Aleph Trust. And through the research I've done in that certification, I've learned that there actually has been research for decades, since the 1960s, on, the idea of spontaneous psychosis coming out of psychedelic use. And what they found through research in all of these decades is basically that for this to happen, basically it's people who have history of extreme psychosis in the past before ever doing any psychedelics. And in that case, where there's this predisposition to, bipolar disorder or psychotic, episodes in the past, those people need to be excluded from psychedelic use, because the likelihood of there being complications from that really depends entirely upon the history going into the first time you use the psychedelics. So that's what research says about that.
Yeah.
And then the other question about, can we use other techniques? So, amazing people who do just really deep meditation can get into creating, maximizing the DMT that's naturally, secreted in our brain. We do naturally produce DMT in our own brain just on a daily basis. It's a normal part of our chemistry. There are also lots of plants that have DMT, and that's part of the plant medicine community. The teacher plants have DMT in them. It's a natural chemical that happens both in plants and animals, ourselves included. So yes, going into deep meditation can maximize the DMT. Also breath work definitely can maximize the DMT in our brain. And, the result of that is that we can get in some very deep states where basically they're altered states, they're transpersonal states, where we can feel very connected with, some people call spirit, some people call the universe, something larger and grander and beyond ourselves or our egoic minds, right? And in that space, a lot of times, we can get in touch with our emotions, that I like to think of it as the inner child, or, get into that space where our core wounds were developed during our childhood. And as a result of that, some of those emotions that we've repressed and suppressed since childhood can come up in a breath session, and you can suddenly feel angry, and there's no thought associated with it. It's just anger or sadness, grief, these lower vibration, denser emotions can come up for healing during a breath session. So that can definitely happen spontaneously out of just the normal DMT production in our mind. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. I just noticed, because I don't have a paid version of Zoom, that we have 10 minutes left of the webinar. You are doing breath work, and you also post on the group so people can join if they want. My plan initially was to do some breath work, 5-minute breath work on this webinar. I don't know if we should open up for questions from the listeners, or if we should do the breathwork session of 5 minutes. I don't know. Do you want to do a hands up to see who wants what?
Well, I'm thinking, you know, if people really want to do a breath session, that's, you know, you definitely can. I think it's kind of interesting. I still had another thought about the question you were answering, you know, when I came in about quote unquote bad trips. I have my own experiences with, you know, journeys that were fearful, and they were the most educational, productive, helpful journeys that I've ever had. And so is there such a thing as a quote unquote bad trip? You know, I don't think so. So, I mean, I think it's an amazing conversation. Anyone who'd like to experience breath work, I do that. I actually have a free breath work session along with shadow work, which gets into our core wounds. And that's coming this Sunday. I do it 2 or 3 times every week. So people are more than welcome to join me in those services. It's through the Psychedelic Society of America.
Yeah, but Diane, since we have so little time left, you wanted you had some reflections on spiritual bypassing.
Sure.
Yeah, would you like to elaborate a little bit about that? Because it's
okay.
Yeah,
in relation to psychedelics.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I've heard people ask the question of, you know, is taking psychedelics a form of spiritual bypassing? And, you know, what is spiritual bypassing? It's pretending that everything's, you know, love and light and everything's perfect, and not being willing to look at our stuff that really is our shadow. The things that we've considered, you know, unacceptable, things that were repressed and suppressed. And, you know, the amazing thing about our shadow is that things that we were told were unacceptable when we were children are also related to our strengths in life. So, for example, if you were told that it's not acceptable to be angry, and so as a child, you learn to suppress your anger. Well, anger, as its light side, is power. And so your personal power also gets repressed. You can't suppress something that, you know, is negative, quote unquote, without also suppressing a power, a superpower, right? And so people who don't get angry also sometimes can't set boundaries, don't feel like they have any personal power in their life. So that's why, you know, through my services, and I don't mean to keep plugging my services or anything, but this is what I do. I do breath work combined with shadow work. And shadow work is, you know, going into those emotional charges that we get on a regular basis. Like, why am I so upset about this kind of question, right? There's a reason that you get like overly upset in certain situations. And the reason is you're being triggered by a core wound. And until you turn around and look at that core wound, you're going to keep suffering those extreme emotions, because you have to shine the light of consciousness on those core wounds for them to integrate. That's the work of integration. And shadow work is the most powerful integrative work that I know. And so what does that have to do with spiritual bypassing? It's really important if you're going to do psychedelics, and psychedelics kind of break open those spaces where sometimes we've built a very strong fortress of ego around those core wounds. And no matter how many times you meditate or whatever else you're doing, you can't get down into those core wounds. Sometimes taking psychedelics kind of breaks that open so that those core wounds are more accessible, and you can get in there afterward and do that shadow work. And you have sort of sometimes some much more deep insight, and you can actually make movement in your life as a result of that work. Whereas without that sort of opening that we can get with psychedelics, it can be less accessible to get in there and do the work. So I have personally found psychedelics helpful in that way. And the research also backs that up as well. Mhm.
Yeah, and this is really interesting because I have seen how people kind of use a lot of money to go from ceremony to ceremony. And I'm a coach and a healer myself, and I've been asking myself that do people really work on those insights that they got during the ceremony, you know, because that's super hard. It's not easy. And I've done that myself. And it's, you know, the things that are your shadows, it's so hard to see. Like you can easily see it in others, but seeing it in yourself is just very difficult. So I'm like, sometimes because we were talking about whether or not psychedelics in and of themselves would help you. And the answer is probably yes, but you know, you'd probably develop even faster and better if you also do the integration work between the ceremonies, because you kind of need to be kind of goal oriented to fix it, and maybe you need someone to talk to, or maybe you need to use different techniques to handle it. Yeah, Oscar, do you want to say something before you leave? No,
I just noticed a very short time left, so yeah, no,
can you see
just
how
wanted
much
to
time we
say
have
bye
left?
to everyone.
Yeah, okay.
Less than a minute, so probably just seconds now.
Is it just seconds? I don't see where the, okay.
It just says less than a minute, so
Maybe we should just say thank you for all for your participation and for enlightening us on the benefits and risks of psychedelics. I think we don't know that much about risks, and I think, like you said, Diane, there are some signs that some people may be more that there be more risk to certain people that have certain types of